Hello and welcome to the Serious About Rugby League show. I'm Will Jackson. I'm sure you know that by now. Joining me is Peter Smith from the Yorkshire Evening Post. We've got Sam Brocksom and Sam Cook as usual. Before we get into the big breaking news of this week, can I just ask you all to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. The channel's building nicely now, so we really appreciate that. Right then, Shaun Wane. He's stepped down from his position as England head coach this week. Brings an end to his 6-year stint in charge. He won 14 of 19 games. Obviously, that was over COVID, so that impacted how much time he actually had with the team. But it follows what was a thoroughly miserable Ashes campaign. We'll start with you, Pete. What was your initial thoughts when the news filtered through on Wednesday afternoon?
I think it's the right decision for a change of coach. I don't know about the timing. That's my main concern. We've got a World Cup coming up at the end of this season. There's no warm-up games on the books. I'm not sure how any new coach is expected to come in and lead a World Cup winning squad under these circumstances. I think it's going to be very, very tough for whoever comes into the job. They're going to appoint a part-time coach, the RFL say, which obviously makes it a little bit tougher. Though I think that's, with the number of games England play, that's a sensible approach. It'll mean that there's more candidates on the table. But the timing of it bothers me. That said, I think Shaun Wane's position was untenable, unfortunately. Having lost the Ashes series 3-0, there was a lot of criticism, rightly so in my opinion, of tactics and team selection. I think the writing was on the wall when he refused to pick Jake Connor, the man of steel, for his squad. He should have had Connor in the squad. He didn't. He was adamant he wasn't going to have Jake Connor in the squad, and he stuck by that. And he, I don't think comments about not knowing who was in the dream team and that sort of thing helped very much. He talked about players having credit in the bank. That was also a misstep, in my opinion. The national coach should select on form, and Shaun Wane, by saying that players in his squad had credit in the bank, he wasn't selecting on form. He was picking players who'd come off a fairly average season at best, and they were average in the test matches. That shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone. He has a good record as coach. As you said, I think it's 14 wins out of 19 games, but the defeats are in the games that were most important. England lost 3-0 in the Ashes, as I've mentioned, which I think we all thought was going to happen, but even so, it's not good enough. And the other significant defeat was to Samoa in the World Cup semi-final 3 years ago. The fact that England didn't get to the final of the World Cup when they didn't have to play either Australia or New Zealand en route was a disaster, really. Yes, England beat Tonga and Samoa in Test series over here, which were good results, but you'd expect England to beat Tonga and Samoa in home Test series. I think Shaun Wane did some good things. I like the spirit he put into the camp, but it was definitely after 6 years England needed a change. But I'm not sure. I think it's reshuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic, as they say, ahead of the World Cup. They might as well have just left Shaun Wane in charge for the World Cup, because a new person coming in is not going to have an opportunity to put his mark on the squad ahead of that tournament. I mean, I'm assuming the first time he'll get to see his team play will be in a warm-up game in Perth in October, and that's just it's stacked against England from the start. I'd be interesting to see who they get. I think the fact it's part-time, there'll be a few candidates coming forward, but it's a very, very difficult job.
Yeah, Sam C, just building on what Pete said there, your initial thoughts, is that the right call for you? I know it's been billed as Shaun Wane stepped down from position rather than being removed, but was it the right call for you?
I'm a bit split, I think. Basically building on what Pete said in the last comment in regards that I'm not sure that any coach that you appoint now will do much of a better job just because of the lack of preparation. I think Shaun Wane at least had, whether he didn't have the fans, that's obvious, but I think the players in the camp, he had them on board. I think what would have been potentially more a smarter decision would be those at the top of the RFL kind of say to him, like, well, look, he was contracted. This was the end of his contract was after the World Cup. So I think it kind of would have been said, right, well, you're done after the World Cup regardless, and we're going to implement almost a selection committee. I think you can give him some power, but I think the clear flaws in his plan were the selection. So I think if you just kind of guide him a little bit on that and say, look, this is, you have to respect titles such as Man of Steel and Dream Team and just form generally a little bit more. At least then, yeah, okay, you might be bringing new players into the squad, but you're still getting a squad that plays under Shaun Wane and that respects him. Again, you maybe would have had to bring in a new attacking coach because I think we all saw that was flawed during the Ashes. But I think rewriting the whole script and bringing in a coach, presumably another coaching team as well, I think you've got just the same chance, probably even less chance of doing anything at the World Cup anyway, which was already a slim chance anyway.
Yeah. Sambi, how do you think, I mean, as we've said, he's won 14 of 19 games, but how do you think Shaun Wane's tenure will be remembered?
I think ultimately, all right, he does have 14 wins, but it's them 5 defeats that he'll be remembered by. Obviously, he lost his first game in charge against the Combined Nations All-Stars, and then, as Pete mentioned, the 3 games against Australia in the World Cup semi-final. The biggest games of his probably career as a coach at Wigan and at England. So yeah, it was. I think it was a good appointment at the start, but as time has gone on, it's proved to not be as successful as the first wanted. But again, like both guys have said, moving forward, it doesn't really matter who they bring in, especially for this World Cup. I think the focus will be on, the series against the potential Ashes series against Australia in 2028, and if New Zealand come over in 2027, that'll be that as well. But yeah, I think just in terms of Wayne as an England coach, I think underwhelming is probably the word to use, because obviously he was so successful at Wigan. He won all the trophies that he could at club level. And then he's gone on to be the England coach, and it's just not really worked out for him. As you mentioned, COVID did impact that, and I think not having a warm-up game before the Ashes again just didn't help him. So some factors are not really his fault, but I think on the whole, it will be a little underwhelming for Shaun Wane and England fans.
Yeah, let's talk about potential replacements then. Pete, who do you think could be? I mean, who's in the running first off? Who do you think could be the ideal man to come in and fill Shaun Wane's shoes?
Well, that's a difficult one, isn't it? Are you going to look for another Englishman? Do you look for someone from overseas? We've tried all these various options and nothing ever seems to work. The fact is that Australia have better players and more players to choose from. So we're up against it from the start. With it being part-time, as I say, that might make it more attractive for a coach. Someone like Willie Peters, for example, I think he's the obvious name that people will look at. He was part of the Aussie camp last year for the Ashes. Would he want to coach England? I don't know, but I would think it would probably appeal to him, and getting somebody in with a knowledge of the way the Kangaroos do things obviously would be helpful. But there's other options. People like Brian McDermott would be a good option, but he works in Australia. Would it work with somebody based in the NRL? That said, the players aren't going to play a game, as we've said before, they get out to Australia. So how much difference would it make? It's a tough one. I'm not 100% sure it's the coach that's going to determine how England do in the World Cup. I just think the game has got to get itself sorted out, and it's got to realise the importance of the the international team. And at the moment, it just doesn't. We're a club-focused sport. And if we're ever going to get anywhere, we need to change that. An England Ashes win would have been great publicity for the game, as would an England World Cup win. We've seen all the publicity generated by the England Women's Rugby Union team by winning their World Cup. Everybody knew they were going to win it in advance, but even so, it's been a fantastic shot in the arm for them. And we need something like that. But the game as a whole just isn't committed to it, unfortunately. And I can't see England ever getting back on par with Australia or indeed the other top nations. I mean, Tonga and Samoa are very, very strong at the moment, and we're lagging behind them, and we will lag behind them until people in charge of the sport get a grip on it and say this is what is important. And at the moment, there's not really any sign of them doing that. Things like the increase to 14 clubs and the rise in the number of overs allowed unquoted aren't conducive to producing a strong national team, in my opinion. Love to be proved wrong. I'd love us to go over there and win in October and November, but I'd say right now I'm not going to. And I have a fear that England, if they lose to Tonga in the opening match, they might not even get to the semi-finals, which would be a disaster, and it won't be the new coach's fault.
Yeah, Sam, see, in terms of, they've made the change with the World Cup in mind, obviously, but in terms of giving him a chance, giving the new guy a chance, the clubs, the RFL, the responsibility is on them now, isn't it, to make sure that this guy has the time he needs with the players.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that you can do to help that as well. I think Challenge Cup final weekend is an obvious one. Obviously, you're going to have two teams in action, but you'd argue that potentially up to 20, 25, 30 England-like candidates won't be playing that weekend. I think that has to be a weekend assigned for an England training camp, or whether it's a training camp or a meetup. I think you have to look at that. You could even potentially look at doing so on the semi-finals as well. I'm not too sure about that. That is something when it was briefed with the RFL at the end of last year, and I kind of mentioned it, and Rodri Jones, I think it was kind of receptive to it as an idea to an extent. But I think something needs to happen in regards to actually putting the players together. So Shaun Wane named his 30-man training squad in June or something like that, and then what did they do there? Did they have any sessions? Like, they didn't really get any game on time. There was no warm-up game. The idea of a PNG versus England friendlies that's been shut down. I think, like Pete says, until those at the top of the sport get serious about doing this, it's kind of a bit redundant. We're playing with one hand behind our back, really, is how I'd put it. Every single year, I mean, when you look at State of Origin, it's not just Australian players that are improving and getting high-level games. You're getting a lot of Tongans and Samoans playing in that as well. So those nations are constantly taking steps forward, whereas we seem to be regressing. I think people hit out when we used to play France in the mid-season international because it would be a blowout score, but again, it was a game, and equally, the more games you play against France are going to get better. I'm not saying that France would be beating England in a couple of years' time, but give it 10 years' time, if you do that consistently, France will be getting closer, and England would also be improving. I think there has to be allowances made, though I'm not necessarily sure how they do that when it's the clubs who make the money. It's the clubs who kind of dictate. The move to 14 teams kind of goes against it completely as well. So I think you hand behind the back, but I think the one aspect that I'd agree or that I like is that they've said it's going to be a part-time, or they've strongly hinted that it's going to be a part-time coach, which opens up the possibilities of numerous, you don't have to just look at who's unemployed. You can look at who are the best coaches that are winning right now. And I think that's a positive, but I'd say that's one of the few that's come out of this decision. Yeah,
just sticking with you, Sam, I just want to ask you about, that mid-season test. Do you think a return to a combined nations all-stars might work? Obviously, they famously beat England in Shaun Wane's first game. Or potentially, replicating that state of origin sort of system where it's Yorkshire versus Lancashire. I know it's not really the rivalry that it once was, but do you think that could work in terms of providing a high level of competition for players?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's important to have you trying to replicate games that matter. And whilst obviously you might say, well, a game against Combined Nations All Stars wouldn't matter, I think it would be if you almost bill it as right, okay, this is the proving ground for an Ashes selection or a World Cup selection. You only get players only know and how they deal at the top level when they play at the top level in that Ashes squad. So you had the Hull KR players and the Wigan players who played in the last two grand finals, and you'd had a few Warrington players who played in the last couple of Challenge Cup finals. But beyond that, none of those players had played in a major final, which would be comparable to an Ashes atmosphere in at least 3 years. And I'm not saying that, okay, you're going to put on a mid-season international or a Combined Nations All-Stars or Yorkshire versus Lancashire, but you have to build all of these types of experience up to make sure that players can handle it at the top level. If you look at what all of the Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, Tonga, they'll have been playing like through all the age groups. You have state of origin through down quite young age groups. They'll have been used to playing in big games that really matter for all of the career. And then, whereas over here, we don't really have that. There's no proving ground for it. And I think it's understated how much importance there is on actually being able to win big games. We saw Hull KR fell in 2024 because they weren't necessarily used to it. And then in 2025, they've learned from it and they've gone and done it. And I think, again, one mid-season international, one game against Combined Nations All-Stars, one Lancashire versus Yorkshire versus Lancashire Origin series, that's not going to change it. But I think these are systems that you have to put in place and just back. But will that happen in rugby league? No, because we change the format every 2 years, 3 years, whatever. I think someone has to kind of take a lot of authority and say, look, this is what we're doing because this is the plan for how we start winning World Cups and Ashes series from 2035 onwards. You can't be looking. You have to look at the really long-term aspects of it because at the moment we're so short-sighted that we can't see what's coming in the sport, which isn't. It's not great what's coming in the sport. You look at Sam just showed it as an article this morning. The NRL have got a $5 billion deal for TV potentially. Super Leagues next season is maybe going to be 25 million. Like you need to start looking more longer term in every aspect of the sport, and I think international is just one of those elements.
Thinking shorter term, then I just want to drill down on who might be the next man. Sambi, Pete's mentioned Willie Peters. Would you like to see that? I mean, look, there's other Super League head coaches in the frame here. Sam Burgess, Paul Rowley, Paul Wellens is an option as well. Give us your take on that. Who would you like?
Willie Peters is obviously the best candidate overseas, won the most recent grand final, and I think even though the England schedule he won't develop players as much as he has at Hull KR, he has got proven track record of doing that. Dean Hadley's now one of the best forwards in the league. Jez Litton's one of the best nines in the competition, and that's down to Willie Peters' coaching. And obviously there won't be enough time for him to replicate that at an England level, but it's something that England do need. And I think something that Sam's mentioned to me previously is you need a man manager, especially in competitions like that. It doesn't matter about your development. You just need the form and the buy-in to the tournament, which again is something that we didn't see in the Ashes. You just need someone that knows how to win those games and what it means to be an England player. And I think that is Sam Burgess. Regardless of what he's done at Warrington, at an England level, he was one of the best players that we've seen in recent history. And I think just having that player with that experience in the squad, not saying he's going to be a head coach, but just in and around the squad, it'll be beneficial for us. And I think Pete mentioned it, Brian McDermott, he's an NRL assistant, so his time will be pretty full, but not as full as if he was a head coach. And I think if he can just, again, help England while he's over there, he'll obviously have a better, knowledge of the NRL boys. If any of them want, anymore want to declare allegiance. And again, he's Super League's most successful coach, so he's got that experience of winning them big games, which is what England needs right now.
Yeah, Pete, it doesn't have to necessarily be a long-term solution either, does it? I mean, we've seen it with the England football team of Thomas Tuchel coming in. I know admittedly he's had 18 months at the job, but he's just going to be there until the end of the World Cup in theory. Can we see something similar with the England Rugby League team? Is Wayne Bennett an option in terms of how he can come in and galvanise a team and bring a team together on short notice, as we saw in 2017?
He's got potential, hasn't he? We've seen him. Go on, Pete.
No. After you, sir.
No, we did. He had the role in the 2010s. Obviously, he took England to the World Cup final, and Cal Watkins didn't get ankle tapped. Who knows what might have been? But it is only a short-term solution. As I said earlier, I think England needs to be planning for them 2027 series against New Zealand. If there is an Ashes in 2028, that needs to be the focus, and then you can start to build on there. I think we've kind of shot ourselves in the foot. It's kind of too late on for 2026 World Cup. I think just someone to kind of steady the ship. As I mentioned, someone who knows what it means to be an England player. Just get the buy-in from the players, and we'll just see what happens. I think it's probably wrong to go in to see it as a free hit, but I think that's what we kind of need to do at this stage.
Yeah, Pete.
I think Sam's right. We need a long-term solution rather than a short-term one. You could get away with a short-term appointment for the World Cup, and that's probably what you'd need if you brought someone like Willie Peters in. I mean, I would imagine Willie Peters has got ambitions in the NRL, hasn't he? And he wouldn't want to combine England and an NRL head coaching job, so it probably would be a short-term option. You could do that for the World Cup, but as Sam says, we need to be building for the World Cup after this one and the Ashes, the next Ashes series, and developing a strong side going forward. That's the way forward. I mean, the coach that comes in for this year isn't going to have time to do much coaching, really, is he? And all the players, if you're in the England squad, you can play. So that they need a man manager and as has been mentioned, and someone who can, a motivator, someone who can get the best out of players up against the odds in difficult circumstances. I think if we could get him, I think Willie Peters would fit the bill in all regards. But I think we need to be looking longer term at a coach for the next sort of 5 years on a more permanent basis. But we also need to give him the tools to work with, and the game's just got to change its view on the importance of international rugby league. That's, as I've banged on about endlessly, that's what's really important. We all saw how many people turned up for the Ashes. We got a sellout at Everton. We got a sellout at Leeds. Wembley had a healthy crowd in there. People want international rugby league. And if we could get a successful England team, it would be such a benefit to the game. I think that the sport needs to be tailored around doing better at international level.
Yeah, just to put a bow on this subject then, and it's something that Pete's already touched on with a healthy dose of realism, but let's be honest, does this change or impact in any way how England are expected to do in the World Cup, Sam C?
I'm not too sure. I don't think England are expected to do much anyway. I think you probably get more allowances because of the situation. I think obviously the format of the World Cup's a bit different. Obviously you have the group with Australia and New Zealand, which is a standard group of 4, and they play each other once. And Australia and New Zealand, in almost all certainty, will progress from that. And then you have the 2 other groups who play across each other, and then you get a 6-team league. And I think it's England's jobs to get out of that 6-team league. But there's Samoa, there's Tonga, PNG aren't daft either. I think you could say there's a realistic chance England don't make the semi-finals, which would be unthinkable. I'm not sure it's happened before, to be honest with you. But I think it is realistic. So I think it's all about that first game, which is against Tonga, and that is one of the biggest games, and yet there's going to be no prep for it, which is kind of why I was on the side of we'll keep Shaun Wane, because at least you're not trying something completely new for a game that is must win. But then again, if you look at what we've said about Shaun Wane, did he win the games that he needed to win? The Tongas and the semi-final, the 3 Ashes games? No. So I think the RFL, to an extent, were in a tough situation with this. Shaun Wane, his selection made his position untenable. I think the RFL kind of caved and acted, but I'm not sure that the situation improves much. Just touching back on what Pete said about someone who's a man motivator and can kind of galvanise teams, I think Paul Rowley's that. I think you look at what he's done with Salford, not necessarily just last year, but before. Like, Salford always play above what the sum of their parts is. They play attacking rugby, which England haven't played under Shaun Wane, and fans are desperately craving. And then you also look at how he handled himself last year in terms of just what he is, how he is as a man. I think he's a brilliant speaker. I think he's someone who would take on the role and do very well. And I think he'd be a popular appointment as well. I'm not saying that Willie Peters can't coach England because he's an Australian, but I think, and I don't want to go into the kind of Shaun Wane, like, oh, Britain haven't won an Ashes since the 70s and like all that sort of rhetoric. But I do think Paul Rowley, with being English, is kind of a more savvy appointment potentially. So I think if you get him in, at least you know you're going to play attacking rugby in the World Cup, which I think is one of the things we've missed. So that would be my appointment, and I think that would give England the best chance, personally.
Okay, then. Look, let's touch on a few other things that have happened over the last week. So we stopped recording last Friday about this time, and a few hours later, Featherstone Rovers were denied an RFL membership for this year. Pete, let's touch on you since it's on your patch. That's a real disappointment, isn't it?
You know, it's very sad. Rugby league without Featherstone Rovers, it's unthinkable, isn't it? It's Featherstone are such an integral part of the sport. Really, they're a traditional, old school, out and out rugby league town and rugby league community. Really, it's the Featherstone's had its industry taken away. Admittedly, a few years ago, but the mining industry went, and the other thing Featherstone Rovers had is rugby league, and now that's gone. It's really sad. I feel sorry for all the staff and players whose livelihoods have been taken away. I feel for all the fans who've followed the club through thick and thin for so many years. It's just a really, really sad situation for the whole town and the sport as well. Rugby league needs clubs like Featherstone. It's an old school rugby league experience. I know they've got an element of supporters that cause trouble. Sometimes it can be an intimidating place to go, but I've always enjoyed going to Featherstone because it's such a rugby league heartland. It is a real rugby league experience, and to be without that is just unthinkable. I'm confident. The RFL seem confident that there will be a Featherstone club next year. I think that will be the case. There are some good people who are getting behind the club now. Paul Cook, for example, who was coach of Featherstone last season, he's leading efforts to get a club back up and running. I'm sure it will happen. Rugby league needs Featherstone, but it's just such a sad situation to be in, and it was a bit of a shock. I don't think anyone saw it coming. Really, we thought that the new club would be, or the new owners would be given the go ahead, and the Rugby League have shown a bit of steel or backbone and said no, we're not putting up with this situation, and I suppose they should be applauded for that. In light of what happened with Salford last year, when everyone said that the RFL should be should have been stricter about whether fit people to govern a club. That sort of test. The RFL are going to criticise if they do and criticise if they don't, but they have shown a bit of leadership and backbone, and they've said we're not accepting the proposal that was put forward. Hugely disappointing and upsetting, but hopefully a stronger club will arise from it.
Yeah, I mean, you was on that round table with me on Monday at the Championship launch with Abiy Akoku. He said there was just to clarify the reason why, he said there was a lot of similarity from the new company to the old company in terms of personnel, and that it just couldn't go ahead like that. He also did say, though, that there's been interested parties come forward already. I asked the question, he's confident that, 2027, Featherstone, 12 months' time, Featherstone will be preparing for the start of the 2027 season as a championship club. Sam C, Fev can take a lot of confidence. Fev fans, can take a lot of confidence from those words. And as Pete mentioned, the Paul Cook statement that came out as well a few hours after that chat on Monday, he sort of outlined that he'd be keen to be part of any consortium going forward, and he wants to see the best for the club.
Yeah, I think that's important that you have someone like Paul Cook involved. I think we've seen with Salford, the people who've revived Salford are people who genuinely care about rugby league at Salford. And I think that's why that's got off the ground so quickly. Obviously, yes, you're going to need money. You're going to need more than just passion to do it. But I think the alternative, or what we saw last year at Salford, was there was no passion from the owners. It was more about how can they make money. Whereas I think obviously now what you're going to have is there's no money to be made at the moment from Featherstone. So you have to have people who see it as a genuine passion project. I think someone like Paul Cook, who's hugely respected in the sport, good head coach as well. I think him being involved with it is a massive boost. I think if you're a Featherstone fan and you see multiple consortiums or whatever you want to call them bidding, I think you're probably going to favour the Paul Cook one because he's trusted, he's established. And I think him being involved would be a massive benefit to them. And I think it has to be along those lines. It has to be someone who actually wants to come in and do it for the right reasons, because we've seen when it's done for the wrong reasons, it goes incredibly wrong. And I think they'll take hope from the Salford situation this year, in the past sort of 3 weeks, where Salford have shown how quickly they can turn things around. Featherstone almost have a 12-month run-up. We know they can't really enter a season midway through it, so they've got a long time. They don't have to rush these processes. They can just go and do it properly and get a really stable base. And I think that's something that, whilst Featherstone fans this year might be gutted because they won't have a team to support, there's lots of obviously local teams in the area and stuff, but they'll have what they'll have next year will be even more special for it. And you'd hope that it'll be stable and strong and it can go on for another 100 years as the previous iteration did.
Yeah, and Sambi, we've seen with the Salford situation, there's a lot of people out there who want to build clubs sustainably, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, and especially in Featherstone, as Pete said, it's a rugby league community. The whole town gets behind the club. And, as we've seen with Salford, the people that care about the club will be the ones that revive it. And, Paul Cook, if he is part of the consortium, certainly is that. And yeah, just to add on what those guys have said, it's just a really sad situation. But there is hope, and yeah, let's hope 2027 is the start of a new era for Featherstone as 2026 was for Salford.
Yeah, so another bit of news, just leaning into the comments that we've had on YouTube about series about rugby Leeds. Let's touch on Leeds. So James McDonnell he's gone to he's signed for Perth Bears for 2027. Sambi, how do you see that? Is that how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's a big blow for Leeds. Obviously, he was part of the dream team in 2025. He's one of the most consistent players in that team. Rarely gets injured. I think he played the majority, if not all, of games last year. But I think the blow is nothing that they can't handle. They obviously brought Ethan O'Neill in from Leeds, this off season. Brad Arthur said in his press conference earlier this week that Callum Watkins might go around for another year, so that's another back row option. They've then got two really promising youngsters in Ben Littlewood and Zach Lloyd, waiting for their chance. So I think, as big as a player he is for Leeds, and obviously it's a great opportunity for him. I think Leeds have that position covered. I think for McDonnell, it's a great experience for him. I spoke to him at the media day on Wednesday, and he said he wasn't really expecting to go to the NRL in his career. It was obviously an ambition of his, but something that at this stage in his career he didn't really think would be an opportunity. He's obviously going with Harry Newman. He's got that Leeds teammate, and they play on the same edge, so they've already got that combination together. And I think that's, especially for Perth, that's what they need. They need people who have already got combinations together and know how to play against each other. Obviously they'll have a pre-season together, but other than that, they don't have that familiarity with each other. But yeah, I think on the whole, it's a good move for McDonnell. It is a blow for Leeds, but nothing that they can't handle at the minute.
Yeah, Pete, just touched. Is it a blow for Leeds? Do you think, as a Leeds Rhinos reporter?
They're losing a quality player, a dream team member, as Sam says. So yeah, to that degree, it's not a disaster. Though they've got a strong academy with some good young kids coming through. The two that Sam have mentioned, in particular, Littlewood and Lloyd. I think Zach Lloyd's someone to watch out for over the next season or two. They've also got recruitment plans in place for 2027. The sporting director in Blees was in Sydney last month looking at players for 2027. That they know the situation. They've got a whole year to prepare for it, so it's not a disaster. I think they should Leeds should see it as a compliment. Really, it shows that they're developing players. They gave McDonnell a chance. Signed him from Wigan, where I think he was highly rated, but he was sort of a little bit of a way back in quite a long queue for his position. He's somebody that's always wanted to improve himself and has gone out of his way to do that. He's earned the opportunity. Good on him. I think it's a bit of a concern for the game as a whole that we're losing players to the NRL, which is a situation that's going to continue as their competition expands. We don't have enough players, really. We can't afford to be losing top players to the NRL, but you can't blame them for going. I think it's a good opportunity for James McDonnell. When he comes back, he'll come back as a better player. And Leeds, I say, if any club is going to be in a decent position to survive losses like that, it's Leeds. Leeds can do it. Saints, Wigan, Warrington can all survive setbacks like that. If other clubs start to lose players to the NRL, it's going to be a bit tougher. But Leeds will be fine. Yeah, and I think James McDonnell will go well in the NRL. I think he's exactly the right sort of player. He's not a flashy type of forward, but he's got a big engine, a high work rate. He's a rock solid defender. He'll make 40 tackles per game. I think he's going to do well there.
Gareth Ellis type.
Well, potentially. I mean, Gareth was probably more of a ball player, I think you might say. But James McDonnell can do that as well. He has got an offload on him, and he's got an eye for the line. He scored 4 tries in a game last season, admittedly against Salford. But I think he's been signed for his work rate and his defensive qualities, and he's very good on both. And as Sam's mentioned, he's going to be playing with someone he knows very well on his edge in Harry Newman. I think it makes sense for Perth to bring in a couple of players with several years' experience playing together. They're going to be they're not going to have a lot of time to get the side together. Once it's assembled, they're going to have a little time to work together. So things like that are sensible planning from Perth's point of view, and I'm sure that there are other Leeds players they're looking at as well.
Yeah, well, I was just about to ask you about that. Jared O'Connor has been linked with NRL interest. How do you see that?
Well, I've known for a while that the NRL have shown an interest in Jared O'Connor. He's also in talks with Leeds. Leeds coach Brad Arthur said the other day that there was some good news coming in the next few days, but he wouldn't give any more information on that. We don't know who the good news is. Nobody's saying, but it could potentially be Jared O'Connor staying on for another year or two. I think Jared's good enough to go to the NRL, but he's 21. So he's got time on his side. I think he'd probably be better off having another few years at Leeds and then looking at a move down under. Brodie Croft's obviously another one who's out of contract at the end of this year and would be a potential option for the NRL and for Perth. Leeds have, fortunately for them, they've got a lot of their top players are now signed up for a few years. It was smart work getting Lucky Miller on a longer term contract because he's somebody that the form he's shown over the past couple of years and his development as a rugby league player, he's somebody that the NRL might look at. They've got Keenan Palacio tied down now since we last spoke on this show. He's signed a long-term deal. And importantly for Leeds, most of their young kids are on mid to long-term deals as well, because I'm sure the NRL will be looking at Leeds' system. And players like Zach Lloyd and George Brown, who you'll hear a bit about this coming season, and Presley Cassell, they're going to be the sort of players that the NRL are keeping an eye on. And fortunately for Leeds, they've got those players on long-term deals.
Yeah, Samsey, in terms of McDonnell going, Harry Newman going, interest in Jared O'Connor, is this, I think I've asked you this before on the show, but how much of a warning sign is this to Super League clubs in terms of, key players running down contracts, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's a big concern. I think it's not new to this year either. We've seen a lot head over in recent years. Obviously, Morgan Knowles, he's one of the older players to head over, but you've got a lot of the younger players. Morgan Smithies, Mike Nicholson. I think we spoke last night, actually. It was a big win for Lee, but also Super League, that Amila Hanley signed a new deal. I think that's massive for the competition because I think the form he showed last year, I think he can't have been far off the Ashes squad. I think you're looking, he won't be far off the World Cup squad this year if he continues in that vein. So I think that re-signing last night sort of confirmed that, okay, we're not a complete fishing pond or such for the NRL for their talent. We are able to retain a lot, but I do think there's a warning sign. I think obviously when you add 14 teams, and then obviously increase the quota, we are diluting the quality in terms of English players. And I think it lends to us bringing in Q Cup and New South Wales Cup players. So I think Super League is potentially diminishing in quality, and then whilst we're using the Q Cup and New South Wales Cup as our talent pool, Super NRL kind of skip that and just go straight to here instead. So I think there's definitely cause for concern, but I think the Hanley re-sign is a big one. I think, but equally we can't just see it as, this is bad for Super League because we've lost XX and X player. It's also great for those players who are going over there. We all know the NRL is the best competition in the world. So for the likes of Newman and McDonnell and Knowles this past off-season who are going over there, you've got to. Why would you not want to test yourself against the best? So I think it's all power to the players, but also it is slightly concerning for Super League. Yeah,
just wanted to touch on Hanley. He was linked to with Hull FC interest as well, actually. So while it's a big win for Super League, him signing a new contract, it's a massive win for Lee as well in terms of their stability and what they can expect going forward, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think Lee are a really well run club in terms of what they have in that respect. I mean, they've had Lachlan Lamb tied down a few years. They've got Edwin Apape, I think, till either 2030 or 2031. They're safeguarding their talents, and I think what you've seen as well with Hanley is he signed for them from Wigan, obviously, and I think he was a bit of a bit part player. But I think if you trust the process with them, he's kind of developed, and obviously now they've reached a level where they're not going to be able to nurture players that long and in a first team environment. They're going to have to be nurtured elsewhere. But I think they're starting to show that they can really develop players under Adrian Lamb. So I think it's a win for them in terms of keeping what is now a blue chip player. But I think also where they are as a club, they've proved they can now develop players, and I think they're starting to establish themselves as a proper top six side. They're no longer. They're certainly not the yo-yo club that they were. They're now really. You'd be shocked if Leeds don't make the playoffs, I think, year in, year out from now on, which is massive compared to where they were just 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Yeah, we'll take a bit of a deep dive at Lee later in a few weeks' time. I'm very aware we've been recording for about 45 minutes now, so just one last final topic for those that have stuck around to listen to it. Hull KR announced 2 big deals yesterday. Oliver Gildart, Joe Burgess have signed new deals. Sam B, good news Hull KR, isn't it?
Yeah, brilliant news. They're getting Burgess for at least 2 more seasons and Gildart for 3 more. And, they pair on that left edge together, and, they're one of the best wing and centre partnerships in the league. They've obviously got experience together at Wigan. Obviously, they both went their separate ways with Burgess at Salford and Gildart to the NRL, but they've found each other again at Hull KR, and it's really prospering for them. To have them long term as a partnership is only good for Hull KR, and if they continue to perform well, it could be at England level as well. I think the thing for Hull KR now is their next biggest priority in getting the other stars tied down. We're talking the senior players. They've got Petter Hiku, Reece Martin, and Suaso Su off contracts in 2026. All them players are very experienced. Hiku will be 34 by the time next season comes round. Martin will be 33 and Sue will be 35. So I think the priority there is Reece Martin, just getting, even if it's just 1 year before he potentially goes to the NRL with the PNG Chiefs. I think, Reece Martin, of them 3 will be the priority. But I think on the whole, both Gildart and Burgess is just great recruitment. It's a sign that Hull KR are now, we know that they're the top dogs in the league, but it's a sign that they can keep their best players, and they are hoping to continue to do that.
Yeah. All right. 4 weeks to go until the start of the Super League season. The Championship season starts tonight, actually, with Salford versus Oldham as we're recording this. Elsewhere this weekend, we've got a couple of pre-season games: Leeds Rhinos versus Castleford and Huddersfield Giants versus York. We've also got Challenge Cup games being replayed. So, so just before we go, I'd like to remind you all to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll be back again very soon. Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us. Please like and share, and we'll see you next week.